Hello, welcome to this video about Soweto. This video is part of a profile assignment made by 3 students from Tilburg, the Netherlands. This profile assignment is a research about the township Soweto, and they focused on 3 important questions. What is the situation on the subject of welfare and well-being in Soweto? How can this situation be improved? And what is the influence of tourism on this township and its development? First of all, I'll tell you a little bit about the township itself. On a global scale, it is located in the continent Africa. From there, we zoom in on the country South Africa. South Africa has 9 provinces in total, which you can see here. Soweto is located in the province Gauteng. The biggest city in this province is Johannesburg. Johannesburg is as well a city as a municipality. As you can see, the municipality is divided into 5 areas. The city Johannesburg is located in the central area, and this is also where Soweto is located. If we zoom in on this area, we can see that it's divided into different regions. Soweto is located in the southwest of the municipality of Johannesburg, in region D. This location is the reason for the name of the township. Before Soweto was an official township, there were loads of smaller townships in this area. They were all located in the southwest of Johannesburg, and therefore they decided to create one big township called Soweto. For the local population, Soweto is also short for So, Where, To. Soweto has 94 sub-areas. They all have a different size, and the largest sub-areas of Soweto include Diepkloof, Pimville, and Dobsonville. Soweto is a district with an area of 200 square kilometers and contains about 1,271,000 inhabitants. The inhabitants have a diverse ethnicity. The vast majority, about 98.5%, is black. Only 0.1% is white, and 1.4% of the population belongs to other ethnicities, for example, Asian. There are also many different languages spoken. The main language is Zulu, which about 37% of the population speaks. In addition to that, some of the inhabitants speak Sesotho, Tswana, and Tsonga. There are also lots of dialects in Soweto, so 25.5% belongs to that category. Soweto is known worldwide for its history. The most important and famous event in the history of Soweto is the Soweto Uprising. This occurred in June 1976 and was an important part of the movement against the apartheid in South Africa. The apartheid was the period between 1948 and 1990, where the government discriminated the black inhabitants of the country. During this regime, the government decided to create an area for the black people to live, so they could separate the black from the white, because the whites were superior to the black. Due to this idea, the township Soweto was created, and this is also the reason almost all the inhabitants of Soweto are black. Because of this regime, the inhabitants of Soweto were discriminated, and their life circumstances were significantly less good than the circumstances of the white inhabitants of the country. At first, the inhabitants of Soweto weren't aware of their unequal situation. They thought that their situation was standard. However, after a while they began to notice that the whites had much higher standards than them. This caused discontentment among the black inhabitants of Soweto. Then the government decided to enhance another measure, which increased this discontentment and was the direct cause of the Soweto uprising. The government decided to change the official teaching language from English to South African. The students in Soweto disagreed with this and organized a protest. BRICS is short for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, And these are 5 countries which are becoming more and more important in the world economy. First, South Africa was not a part of the BRIC countries, but since 2011 South Africa became a full member and BRIC became BRICS. These BRICS countries make up to 40% of the world's population and cover more than a quarter of the land surface of the world. It is expected that in 2015 the combined economies of these BRICS countries will be greater than the combined economies of today's richest countries. South Africa seems to have a huge advantage of the membership of the BRICS countries. It creates a lot of opportunities to get a better relation with other BRICS countries and create more trading partners. The province that benefits the most is Gauteng. Thanks to the city Johannesburg, this province has become the most influential province of South Africa. Soweto is one of the less prosperous areas of Gauteng and therefore has the least benefit from the BRICS membership. From an economic point of view, Soweto provides a small contribution to the economy of Gauteng and to the economy of South Africa. In the field of knowledge, the civils are behind, and therefore this area is not attractive for business companies. In addition to that, it does not have a good infrastructure, and therefore it's not sufficiently in contact with other areas, and this causes it to have little influence on the local, national, and global economy. The next indicator is the GDP. GDP is short for Gross Domestic Product, and the definition is the value of all the products and services that are provided by a country in a year, and it's expressed in money. It is a good indicator of welfare because it shows how productive a country is. In this graph, the GDP of South Africa is shown in American dollars. The national GDP in 2016 was $294 billion. In this graph, the GDP is shown on a regional level. You can see that there is a big difference between the provinces. South Africa has 9 provinces as mentioned before, and most of the national GDP is determined by 3 provinces. Gauteng is the smallest province but has the largest contribution, about 38%, and this is equivalent to $112 billion. Soweto itself only delivers 4 billion to the national GDP of South Africa, which comes down to only 21%. The next indicator is the labor force distribution, and this gives information about how many people contribute to the welfare. This image shows a graph about the population of South Africa, and it shows how the population is built up on the subject of employment. South Africa has 35.5 million inhabitants that belong to the category with an official work age. An official work age is an age between 15 and 64 years old. 15.1 million of them have a job, which is less than 50%. If we look at this graph, it gives us a closer look of the unemployment per province. Gauteng, which is mentioned before and which is mentioned in the graph as GP, has one of the lowest unemployment rates, which again shows that it is a developed region on an economic base. It might not be perfectly visible in this graph, but this graph shows the unemployment rate in each region of Soweto. You can see that the unemployment rates of Soweto is different in every region. The average unemployment rate of Soweto as a whole is around 27%. This is almost the same as the unemployment rate of Gauteng. The employment of Soweto is around 50%. Deep Globe has the highest percentage of employees and Eldorado Park the lowest. The average of the employees also corresponds with the employment rate of South Africa as a nation. The last indicator which is important to look at is the income of the household. This indicator gives a closer look at the economic situation of an individual family. On a national level, the annual income of the households is different per skin tone. These differences are shown in this graph. The blank people earn a lot more. They earn almost 5 times more than the black. You can also see that the income of every skin tone has increased in the past 10 years. Almost every skin tone earns twice as much in 2011 than they did in 2001. On a provincial level, you can see that the income of the households in each district are quite different, just as we saw in the previous slides with the GDP and the labor force distribution. The income on a provincial level also increased a lot between 2001 and 2011. Moreover, just like the other indicators, Gauteng scores the best in this indicator. That Gauteng has the highest household incomes does not mean that Soweto has a lot of benefit of this. Around 80% of the civils of Soweto does not have an income at all. This is around the same percentage of the unemployment rate that was showed previously. Of the people who do have an income, the average of the annual income is between the $2,821 and the $5,642 a year. This is very little for a living. If you compare this to the Netherlands, the average annual income of a household is around $41,481. An option to improve situations for the inhabitants is to let the larger companies take over the smaller companies. These larger companies are more in contact with other international areas. Therefore, there can be more exchange of products and knowledge, and Soweto's economy might grow. To ensure that these large companies would like to invest in this township, there are several improvements needed. It is necessary to improve the infrastructure, so the companies will be more accessible and more companies will be interested in Soweto. If the welfare in Soweto will improve, Soweto might be able to develop itself. Also, an economic development might lead to an improvement of the well-being of the inhabitants. The next subject that was researched in the profile assignment is the well-being in Soweto. To research the well-being of the inhabitants of the township, we need to take a closer look at 4 different subjects: health, education, housing, and criminality. These 4 subjects each have a crucial impact on the inhabitants and therefore are important indicators of the well-being in Soweto. So first we take a look at the subject health. If you look at the province Gauteng, there are 40 hospitals in total. When we take a closer look at Soweto, there is only one. However, this hospital is very important, and it's called the Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital. It belongs to the top 3 biggest hospitals in the world and was originally built in World War II to heal British soldiers. If you look at the health problems in Soweto, there are 2 very important problems. The first health problem is HIV. HIV is a big issue all over the world and causes loads of victims. If you look at this map of the HIV rates in the whole world per country, you can see that South Africa belongs to the category of the countries with the HIV rate of 10% or more. Therefore, South Africa is one of the countries with the highest HIV rates in the world. In 2016, there was a total of 7.1 million people living with HIV and 110,000 AIDS-related deaths. If you take a closer look on the province Gauteng, you can see that 16.5% of the inhabitants of this province are infected with the HIV virus. How many people in Soweto are infected is unknown. The high HIV rates in this country are caused by the stigma that is present in the whole country. People who are infected with HIV have a negative reputation in the society and often are isolated. Because of the stigma, people are ashamed to get themselves tested, which causes the virus to spread itself across the population. Also, People are afraid to get medical help because of the stigma, and this causes people to die at a younger age. To decrease the number of HIV-infected inhabitants, we have to get rid of this stigma. On a global scale and national scale, this can be achieved by the government. By giving campaigns about the disease, the effects, and the solution of HIV, people are more used to talk about it, and they are more informed about the subject. On a local scale, this can be achieved through education. This may prevent people from getting infected and prevent the virus from spreading itself across the population. Once people are talking about it, the taboo will disappear little by little, and more people will get themselves tested, and more people will get medical help. In this way, the HIV rates in a country can drop. The second health problem that has a big influence on the inhabitants of Soweto is the pollution. On the east side of Soweto, there's a mine dump located. The drilling at the mines causes a lot of dust. This gets picked up by the wind. When the wind blows in the direction of Soweto, the dust strikes down in the township. The dust is toxic and can consist of radioactive parts. Therefore, it causes short and long-term health problems for the inhabitants. Examples of short-term problems are asthma, eczema, or sight problems. And the long-term health problems are caused by the radiation of the dust particles. The dust also has an effect on the nature of Soweto, because the dust pollutes the water. This comes at the cost of the nature and of the health of the inhabitants, because the people don't have clean drinking water anymore, and they clean themselves in the polluted water. The quality of the education is caused by the government during the apartheid. The apartheid was the period between 1948 and 1990 where the government discriminated other races than the whites, as mentioned before. During this time, the government spent 4 times as much money on the education of white children than the education of black children. Nowadays, this is very visible. The schools in Soweto itself are of insufficient quality, while the schools in the surrounding townships or the white suburbs are better. To solve this problem and to improve the situation, the government, which is leading now, should invest more in these schools than in the schools in the suburbs. The biggest subjects they can improve on is the quality of the teachers, the quality and structure of the education program, and the teaching material, because the lack of these three things are the main problems in the Soweto school system nowadays. The next subject that is part of the well-being is the housing. Typical for Soweto are the so-called matchbox houses. These are 4-room houses built by the government at the beginning of the 20th century. Around 1905, there was gold discovered at the Witwatersrand. Witwatersrand is a chain of mountains located in Gauteng. This started off a flow of black workers who were looking for a better life. All these workers needed a place to live, so the government started building loads of houses in a small period of time, the matchbox houses. However, the government didn't think the workers would stay for long, so they didn't invest much time and money into these houses. This led to quite bad living circumstances for the workers and also for the inhabitants of Soweto nowadays. The flow of workers kept growing and growing, and at some point the government couldn't keep up anymore. The new workers that came, they became homeless, so they started to build their own homes out of scratch. This was the beginning of the slums in Soweto. Slums are packed areas with little houses, built of corrugated iron, plastic, and waste. These houses belong to the poorest inhabitants of the township, and the life circumstances in these areas are very bad. Most part of Soweto consists of poor housing. However, there is a complete different side of the township as well, which most people wouldn't expect. Soweto has the highest concentration of millionaires compared to all the regions in South Africa. As well, black millionaires as white millionaires live in these suburbs. They possess millions of dollars, they live in big villas, as is visible in this picture, and they possess fancy cars. The inhabitants of the suburbs have access to good education, and infrastructure. And they live in circumstances that are completely opposite of the poor parts of the township. The fact that there are also black millionaires in the township is received differently in the poorer parts. On the one hand, there are people who are proud, because 20 years ago they would have never thought that there would be a black millionaire living in the white suburb. On the other side, there are people filled with bitterness because of jealousy, because they live in the poor slums, while other black people live in these rich villas. The last subject of the well-being in Soweto is criminality. In a township like Soweto, there is quite some criminality. There are no concrete statistics about Soweto, so the situation in Soweto is unknown. However, if you look at the statistics of Johannesburg, you can make an assumption of the criminality in Soweto. As you can see, it is clear that there is a high criminality rate in Johannesburg. The biggest problems in the city are car theft, vandalism, theft in general, violent crimes, and corruption. This criminality has two causes. The first one is the poor living circumstances. As mentioned before, there are quite a lot of people living under bad circumstances in the slums. They want to improve their situations, however, they aren't able to do that by working. Therefore, they use criminal deeds to achieve this. The most common crimes are theft, drug dealing, and armed robbery. The second explanation for the criminality in the township is the tension between the inhabitants. During the apartheid, the government placed people from different African tribes in one township. And these tribes each had their own language and culture, and therefore living together causes lots of tension and violence. To decrease the criminality in Soweto, the welfare of the inhabitants has to improve. Once people have more income, they have the possibility to improve their situation, and they don't need to use crimes to achieve this anymore. If the welfare of the inhabitants of Soweto improves, crimes are not as necessary anymore. As a result of that, one expects to especially see a decrease of the amount of thievery and vandalism. Also, if you want to decrease the criminality among youngsters, we think the best way to achieve this is education. If children go to school, they have a more structured life, and they might learn that criminality is not the solution. Moreover, they have a better future perspective, which might make them less willing to commit crimes, and they have a smaller chance of ending up in the criminal world when they are older. To improve the situation in Soweto, in general, there have to happen lots of things. In this whole process, the government will have the most important role, because they are the most influential. However, this is not the only factor that can improve the situation. Another factor that has quite some influence is all the local projects. There are lots of development organizations active in Soweto. They're all very different and are active on the different areas of the society. For example, all the subjects of well-being we talked about, and also on the subject of welfare. Individually, these projects might only help a very small part of the population. However, all these parts joined together, they can actually have an important role in the development of the township in general. Also, most of these organizations not only help the present inhabitants, but they are also working on a sustainable development plan, so their help not only improves the current inhabitants of the Soweto, but also the inhabitants in the future. So far we've talked about the two subjects, welfare and well-being, so now we move on to the last subject, which is tourism. Soweto might not be the first place you think of when you are planning your vacation. You might think of world-famous tourist destinations like Paris or the beautiful beaches of Indonesia. However, there are quite a lot of travel organizations active in Soweto as well. Due to its history, there are quite some tourists in the township. They visit the Orlando Towers, the slums, or do varying other activities like hiking or cycling. In the whole world, one can see that tourism has a big influence on the society. In this study, we asked the question, how does tourism influence the community of Soweto? We found out that it has a positive and a negative influence on the society. First, we'll take a look at the positive influence of tourism on Soweto. Tourists who come to Soweto spend money on different things to create an enjoyable vacation. The most important things they spend money on are places to sleep, a restaurant or a cafe, and products in shops. This leads to an increased income of the owner of the place, and also not only the owner, but also the employees benefit from the extra income. Because of the tourists, they have a higher income, and thus their welfare is improved. The improvement of the welfare of the people could lead to an improvement of the well-being as well. They now have more money to invest in their healthcare and the education of their children. Moreover, they can afford a better house and the criminality in the township might decrease. Besides the improvement of the welfare and well-being of the population, tourism has another benefit. The tourists who come to Soweto want to see the township. To make this as comfortable as possible, the infrastructure in the township has to improve. Tour operators want to make their clients as content as possible and therefore are willing to invest in the infrastructure in Soweto. In 2013, there was a research about the amount of jobs in the tourism sector and to what extent tourism is important for the economy. UNWTO is short for United Nations World Tourism Organization. This is a specialized agency of the United Nations for tourism. In their research, it turns out that there are 1.4 million jobs in the tourism industry, which is about 10% of all the jobs in South Africa. The exact numbers about the tourism industry in Soweto are unknown. However, if you would assume the case in Soweto is the same, this would mean that 10% of the jobs in Soweto are relying on tourism. If the number of tourists grows, more jobs will be created and the economy of Soweto will grow. Besides, more people will be able to improve their life circumstances. In this way, tourism can contribute to the development of the township and of the improvement of the life of the inhabitants. Also, tourism does not only have economic benefits, it also has benefits from a social perspective. As mentioned before, Soweto has a special history, and due to its history, it has become the symbol of the battle against inequality based on race or color. There are some museums which show this history, and besides that, the houses of Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu are located in Soweto. Both these persons had a big influence in the battle against inequality. These houses and museums are quite popular amongst tourists. The local people benefit from this from a social perspective because they take pride in their history. Especially the old inhabitants are proud of their history. They want their history to be known and respected, and they appreciate the fact that the tourists want to become informed about the township and its history. However, there are also negative sides about the tourism in Soweto. Some tourists, especially the ones from the fast world, can have a negative attitude towards the inhabitants of Soweto. They might feel like they are superior because they have better living circumstances. They look down on the inhabitants, and this is visible in two different things. The first thing is the tourist buses. In general, the tourists move through the township by bus, and sometimes they don't want to get out of the bus. They are scared that they will be robbed, or they will be a victim of other criminal activities, especially when they are in the slums. They feel scared. And this shows that they have a negative attitude towards the inhabitants of the slums and the township in general. The negative attitude is also visible in what they call the zoo concept. Some of the tourists walk around in the township, and there they make pictures of what they see. In general, this is what tourists do, and they think it's normal. However, for the local inhabitants, it might be humiliating and disparaging. They might get the feeling like they are objects or animals. And people consider this as the same concept as in a zoo, and this is unhuman, and can create a negative attitude towards the inhabitants of the township, but also the other way around. The Soweto inhabitants feel humiliated and can get negative feelings towards the tourists. This might lead to crimes against the tourists, and in this way there might arise social polarization. So now we've examined Soweto from 3 different point of views: welfare, well-being, and tourism. As we've seen, it is a township with lots of things that need to be improved, but it's also a township with a very special history. I hope you've become a lot wiser. We have enjoyed the research a lot, as we think it is a very interesting place. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as we did. Thank you for watching.